At 3:15 a.m., October 12, 2025. Deep inside Russia, 44 Ukrainian drones sliced through the fog at nearly 300 miles per hour. 10 flew high as false fighters. 10 Banshee jet, 80 decoys screamed Phantom Su-27 signatures into the sky. Below them, 34 strike drones, Punisher and RAM-2, hugged the earth, moving like a living blade. Their target was not a fortress. It was a moving artery. A convoy of Kaluga-class transport trucks hauling guidance modules for Shahed 136 drones. That road fed almost 80 drone kits an hour into Moscow's war machine. Stop the road. Stop the eyes in the sky. On the ground, Russian commanders trusted their Tor M2 and Pantsir S1 systems like iron walls. Some joked nothing could touch their convoys. But for 43 days, Ukrainian intelligence had watched. 9 terabytes of satellite and drone footage. Every checkpoint, every shift, every flaw. Nothing was random. That night, Ukraine did not call in artillery. It sent precision, algorithms, patience, intent. The order was surgical. Not to destroy everything, but to cut the vein that fed an empire before sunrise. Each drone carried more than explosives. It carried timing and the weight of a plan years in the making. If you want to see how one night changed the balance of an entire front, subscribe now. Tell me in the comments, what year were you born and how does your generation define courage? At 4:27 a.m. Before dawn, over the Don River, a convoy of Kaluga-class transport trucks pushed toward Belgorod. They carried guidance modules and GPS units bound for Shahed 136 drones. Russia guarded that route with Tor M2 surface-to-air systems and M18 helicopters on patrol. 60 miles away, a cramped Ukrainian control van hummed with life. Operators watched over Starlink uplinks. Live video flowed from a Bayraktar TB2. An RQ-20 trailed the road like a hawk. Crates of Switchblade 600 loitering munitions sat queued and silent. Fingers hovered above controllers. Cold coffee steamed in paper cups. The air smelled of metal and electric tension. Intelligence said this road fed roughly 80 drone kits an hour into Moscow's arsenal. That number read like a verdict. So Ukraine would strike the shipments, not the drivers. They called it Operation Vein Cut. Screens mapped movement like constellations. Each blinking dot was a decision. Each line was a lifeline. It looked clinical, until you remembered what each dot meant. Then the choice felt heavy. What do you see when those lights crawl across a map? Pure strategy or something darker? If you were in that van, would you press the button? At 6:12 a.m. In a quiet room outside Kharkiv, a small Ukrainian intelligence team watched a glowing map spread across the table. For 43 days, they had collected more than 9 terabytes of satellite and drone data. Every truck, every radio ping, every checkpoint on the Belgorod route was marked, labeled, and timed. On one screen, a Bayraktar TB2 drifted high at 15,000 feet. On another, an RQ-20 followed the same road like a hawk in the clouds. In the corner, a crate of Switchblade 600 loitering munitions waited, silent and patient. This mission was not about spectacle or noise. It was about rhythm, timing, and the calculus of a single cut. They rehearsed it like surgeons listening for the right heartbeat before an incision. The lead intelligence officer leaned forward and tapped a flashing red sector on the display. He said one word, "Pulse," and the room went still. Numbers stopped being numbers. They became breath. They became consequence. They were not targeting soldiers. They were cutting the bloodstream that fed the enemy's eyes in the sky. When you imagine war, do you see chaos or calculation? Can a quiet room full of screens be as deadly as a tank column? If you were in that room, watching those lights crawl across the map, would you call it justice or revenge? At 2:43 a.m. The night over Belgorod was thick with fog and static. Radar towers swept the sky like lighthouses of steel. Inside a cramped Ukrainian command truck, rows of screens glowed blue. The air smelled of metal, coffee, and sweat. It was time to launch Operation Vein Cut. The plan had two phases: distraction and precision. 10 Banshee jet. 8-0 decoys climbed to 15,000 feet. Their transponders screamed a false Su-27 signature into the Russian air picture. Make them look up. Make them waste their bullets on ghosts. Beneath that artificial storm, 34 strike drones, Punisher and RAM-2, hugged the terrain. They flew under 100 feet. Their wings cut the fog like razors. Each carried a mix of penetration and thermobaric warheads. Light enough for a backpack, powerful enough to shred concrete. A learning algorithm called Black Finch guided the swarm. It calculated wind shifts, radar reflections, and signal interference in real time. If one drone fell, the others rewrote their routes instantly, a flock pivoting in midair. On Russian screens, the deception worked. Pantsir S-1 batteries locked on the decoys first. The sky lit with orange streaks as missiles leapt from tubes. For 30 seconds, the defenders saw victory. 10 targets destroyed. Operators cheered. Those explosions were the opening act. While smoke drifted across the horizon, the real swarm slipped inside the kill zone. Operators switched from AI to manual control. You could hear breathing on the comms. Steady at 50 feet. Crosswind 10. Lock confirmed, target in range. The words were short and heavy. At 2:49 a.m., a single Punisher dove and struck a power relay beside the logistics hub. The blast was surgical. The grid feeding half the radar network blinked out. 37 seconds of blackout opened like an incision. In that blind window, the swarm rushed forward. Multiple RAM-2 drones dove into the convoy yard and detonated above parked trucks. Shockwaves rolled across the tarmac, flipping steel like tin. Several more slammed into the central warehouse, where roughly 160 guidance modules sat waiting. When the dust settled, the building was fire and twisted frames. From the van 60 miles away, operators watched heat bloom on their monitors. One said quietly, "That's the pulse." Not celebration, recognition. The artery had been cut. By 2:53 a.m., smoke and silence filled the sky. Black Finch recorded every millisecond, turning chaos into data. 10 minutes of drone work had done what artillery could not in a week. When you picture war now, do you still see trenches and rifles? Or is this what modern war looks like? Algorithms and joysticks deciding who sees the sunrise. If intelligence becomes the new artillery, what part of war is left for courage? Tell me in the comments. When machines fight for humans, who really wins? 3:07 a.m. The battlefield changed hands. What began as a silent Ukrainian offensive became a furious Russian counterhunt. The first strike had blinded half the radar ring around Belgorod. For a moment, the defenders celebrated. Then a backup snapped online. Inside a concrete bunker on the city's edge, operators rebooted a 96L6E radar array, a system so sensitive it could spot a bird at 20 miles. They were done celebrating. Now they were angry. Orders came fast. Deploy BUKM-3 batteries. Activate thermal scopes. Scan every altitude. A dozen technicians moved like a pit crew. Monitors flickered. Coordinates updated. Crosshairs snapped into place. For a moment, the sky looked empty. Then a ripple appeared. 30 signatures moving low, fast, erratic. The officer leaned forward and said, "Engage." The first 9 M317M missiles streaked upward. Black Finch, still alive in the cloud, saw it coming. The AI rerouted the swarm mid-flight. Lines became spirals. Spirals became storms. Formations no human could fly. One drone dropped, then another. Losses were absorbed like a boxer rolling with a punch. Wind hit next. A cold front slammed the valley at 28 miles per hour, twisting trajectories like paper. Inside the van, voices tightened. Crosswind 28. Correction applied. Hold altitude. We are still live. Hands never left the controls. Back in Belgorod, the screens bloomed with noise. Black Finch released a new layer of deception, electronic decoys mimicking real infrared signatures. To Russian sensors, the sky suddenly held 200 targets instead of 30. Boat crews fired blind. Missiles tore through the night and detonated against ghosts. For 30 seconds, it rained fire over empty air. They still had one trick left. Orlan 10 reconnaissance drones launched to mark true heat trails. The disguise began to peel. 8 more drones went dark. Icons blinked out one by one. Each loss hit like a missed heartbeat. Yet the mission pushed on. At 3:19 a.m., survivors dropped to 30 feet, skimming dew on the grass. Pilots switched to manual, reflex over algorithm. Every move was muscle memory, not math. By 3:22 a.m., the sky looked like lightning trapped inside a snow globe. Missiles, drones, decoys tangled in chaos. The fight had slipped from calculated algorithms into raw survival. One fact remained clear. Every missile fired here was one less that could be fired at a city. When you imagine modern war, do you picture faces or coordinates? When both sides fight with algorithms, who shows more courage? The one who codes or the one who stays in the seat? If fog, wind, and machines all take sides, where does human instinct fit? Would you trust the machine or your own hands? 4:03 a.m. The fire still burned over Belgorod. The supply hub that once moved 80 drone kits every hour was gone. Satellite images confirmed it. More than 160 guidance modules destroyed, 12 trucks melted into frames, and 2 radar stations offline. The blast rippled through Russia's logistics network like a skipped heartbeat. For the first time in months, the Shahed 136 factory belts went silent. Inside Kiev's command center, analysts watched a live feed from a Bayraktar TB2 circling 15,000 feet above the smoke. What they saw was not triumph. It was absence. A hollow rhythm where war had been constant. Within 48 hours, Russian Shahed attacks over Donetsk dropped by 70%. Entire units lost their eyes in the sky. The mission had cost 30 drones, but it bought something far greater than time. It bought silence. And in war, silence can be worth 1,000 shells. Operation Vein Cut proved that precision could break power, and that intelligence could achieve what artillery never could. When you think of power, do you picture tanks or timing? If one night of planning can quiet an entire front, what else can intelligence reshape? And when war becomes a battle of minds, what kind of courage do you think matters most? War today is no longer just the clash of armies. It is the collision of intelligence, patience, and precision. Watching what happened that night, you understand. The battlefield has changed forever. A drone is no longer just a weapon. It is a decision, a thought made visible. Every pixel of satellite imagery, every whisper across a radio, every flicker of a radar screen carries weight measured not in steel, but in consequence. The lesson is simple, but sharp. Power without strategy is noise. Intelligence without purpose is silence. But when clarity meets courage, even a small force can move a mountain. Ukraine proved that in a world ruled by machines, human intent still writes the final line. Behind every calculation was a heartbeat. Behind every drone, a choice. Technology does not erase humanity. It magnifies it. So when you think about this story, ask yourself, what kind of power would you choose? The one that destroys, or the one that decides? Because the future of conflict may not belong to those with more fire, but to those with more focus. If this story made you think, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And tell me in the comments, what year were you born? And how does your generation define courage in the age of intelligence?